great product management demands a fusion of art and science. My guest, Jason Knight, learned this firsthand coming from a background in engineering. He relied heavily on his technical skills initially as a product manager. Jason realized he needed to round out his abilities in areas like marketing, sales, and business strategy. He boosted his learning through books, podcasts, and experts across the domain. This continuous improvement transformed Jason into a well-rounded product leader, able to collaborate across departments. He stresses that the best product managers never stop honing a diverse blend of empathy, communication, savvy, business acumen, and technical expertise. Stay tuned as Jason explains why mastering this combination makes for exemplary product leadership. What I really love to start with is something that you touched on, which is the art of product management. And I think that, especially coming from an engineering background, there is this artistic aspect, not designed from the creative perspective, but actually an art form to understanding how you build great products and then how you create a team around to not deliver that product and support it. And so you've been on all sides of that. And I'd love to have you talk us through a little bit more about what that's been like in your journey to understand what actually is the key artistic areas of product as a product manager and leader.
So I think one of the things that I've reflected on as I've tried to, get better at this over the years is, and I kind of almost refer to it as a zone of most competence, which maybe I just copied from someone else, but this idea that as a developer, as a really technical person and someone that, still to this day, I'm still involved in bits and pieces of development for side projects and stuff like that. It's really easy for me to default to a technical sort of developer mindset. It's really easy for me to just think that's all I need to be good at. And I've certainly worked in product management roles where I've sat there and looked at the things that I've done in a particular week and been like, the product didn't really move on very far, but some of the tech stuff that we did on the side was kind of handy. Like, we managed to unblock a few things, but the product was still kind of not where it needs to be. And that's where you start to think, it's not, there's more to life than this, right? Like, it's not just about being the best technical solution. And this is obviously something that is a kind of a common thing that comes out. You have to concentrate on the solution, not the technology that you're using to deliver the solution. You have to concentrate on your users and what you can unlock for them, not just how good you can make yourself feel because you've used such and such a database technology or something like that. So getting yourself in that mindset of it's not just about you and not just about the cool things that you can discover and type. Like, again, I love doing all of that stuff, but it's not enough. So then that gets me into this mindset of like, I don't want to default to being a technical guy. In my case, I want to be good enough at all of it so that I can be really effective as a product manager, as a product leader, as a coach, and as a leader of tech product teams and all of that stuff. Like, I want to be in a position where I can have a good conversation with marketing, with sales, with the leadership of the team or the leadership of the company, with the investors in the company, with obviously customers and users as well. Like, I want to be in a position where I can have as good a conversation with all of those people as I can with the developers that are kind of my default kind of gang of people that I would naturally have the best conversations with. So I've done a lot of work over the years, obviously through the podcast, which is, little mini plug again, but like through the podcast, we're talking to a bunch of different people, through reading books, like yours and others, to try to up my game in the areas that I was traditionally weaker because that wasn't where I came from. Like, there was no reason for me to know anything about marketing until I got into this game more fully because that just wasn't the world that I was in. It's okay for me not to be good at that. It's not okay for me to stay not good at that if I want to be in a position that I'm in.
So, you're really talking about this passion of being a continuous learner. And I think the best, people that I've met, the most successful teams that are continuously being able to iterate and produce great products are in that mindset. They have that continuous learner spirit. And, obviously, we've touched on the podcast, so let's talk about it for a second. I believe you're close to approaching 175 episodes now, getting really close there. You've been doing that for a while. I would love to hear a little bit about what are some of the main lessons or biggest takeaways or the most memorable takeaways that have really shaped your thinking around product since you started this journey of continuous learning and interviewing leaders from all over the world to understand these different facets, both the art and the science behind product and getting their perspective.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I kind of see it in two basically completely opposite ways. I've learned a lot from really interesting people about the specifics and the differences in product management, and maybe sometimes the differences in the ways that product management is kind of manifested around the world and in different types of company, different teams. But I've also noticed how many similarities there are as well. And I do this with fireside chats as well, which I do with teams, go and chat to teams and get them to pepper me with questions. And again, you see the same questions again and again because there are so many commonalities between teams, but also obviously just so many different representations of how products get built and the types of stakeholders, the types of markets that they go into and stuff like that. So I think the diversity of just how product is while simultaneously having this kind of central thread of productness, I think is really interesting. But, for me, I think it's just been absolutely wonderful to just have the chance to even speak to some of these people. Like, they had no reason to speak to me, certainly not to start with. Obviously, as the podcast got a little bit more popular, it becomes something where maybe there's something in it for them. But certainly to start with, there were people that gave me very generously some of their time to talk to someone who they had no idea who they were, and they had no idea who I was. And there was no real reason for them to do that. And they were generous enough with their time and patient enough with their listening and, accepting the fact that I was getting into this at the time. And it was just really, I was just really grateful that's even possible. And obviously as I've got better at it over the years, it's become, I think it's 172 episodes as of, 171 and one in the bag ready to go. So there's been a lot. I've learned a lot about how to talk, how to present myself, how to stop umming and ahhing and all of that good stuff, try and be a bit more an effective and somewhat engaging presenter, I guess. But at the same time, I've just spoken to so many interesting people, and some of those people are people that you've heard of, and obviously you were one of those people, but there are some people out there, like your Marty Kagans of the world, the Melissa Perrys of the world, like the big names that everyone would expect to be super insightful, and of course they were. But also then maybe some of the less well-known people that still have really fantastic and interesting stories to tell or perspectives to share, or maybe even people like, speaking to guys in Africa that are building alternative finance products for people that live in underserved communities in the middle of the desert and stuff like that. Like these are interesting stories that I didn't hear on other people's podcasts, or not so much. I mean, I'm frankly sure there are other podcasts out there that cover some of those issues, but just being able to go out there and find people that have interesting stories. And even if they were telling me things that I already kind of knew, because, maybe it's someone that's book I've read and I kind of knew what was in it already, or even if it's just someone that's talking about a topic that I'm kind of already aware of, just hearing the kind of energy and the emotion in people's voices, and also just the different perspectives that they bring, I think has been really, really rewarding. And it helps me look at products in a more open-minded fashion. Like I've never really believed that I was like the cleverest person or the best person about any of this stuff. Like I've always wanted to learn, but there's nothing that kind of grounds you and keeps you humbled and more than just listening to other people that, whether or not they have a following or pulpit or anything like that, they're just as good as you or probably better than you. And it kind of keeps you humble and willing and eager to kind of keep going and try to make yourself as good as some of the people that you end up speaking to that don't have those followings, but they don't have them because they're too busy doing amazing work.
Well, I think humility is such a powerful tool in just being, one, a great person, but another, being able to actually develop great products. I mean, it's really a necessity to be humble, to shift and keep your ego or your biases out of the way when you're trying to connect with an audience. And so you're certainly embodying that with your podcast. You had touched on something that I'd love to hear a little bit more about too, which is this, you're having these conversations, you're doing these fireside chats with teams and talking to them. And you mentioned there's a lot of common questions that are overlapping. And I'd love to hear a little bit about what are some of those common questions that you're getting asked and you see happening again and again. when you're talking to these teams?
Yeah, well, a lot of it, and maybe it's self-selection because, I've kind of got a B2B niche that I go into. So like maybe I'm speaking mainly to people that have those types of problems. Maybe if I was like starting to go into lots of B2C companies, it'd be different, although I'm sure there'll still be some. But a lot of it is around, fairly common issues like, well, what do we do about the sales team? How can we stop the CEO telling us to do this stuff? How can we prioritize such and such when there's all this other stuff going on? It's how do we get the developers to work with us on these things rather than shouting at us when our requirements are wrong? And like there's just these common, there are different manifestations of those. Obviously, like different teams have different specific problems, but there's just so many kind of commonalities between teams around some of the, I mean, I'd probably argue that the majority of it is just almost trying to work out the best way to describe it, but like an uncertainty about where product sits philosophically within an organization, and like how much product should be taking orders versus giving orders. And if I would go on record as saying that neither of those things, by the way, but at the same time, I do think that there's a lot of that kind of uncertainty and almost like imposter syndrome within the very art of, or concept of product management, that product managers don't know why they're there, or they don't think that they're as important as other teams within the organization, even though obviously all the literature and all the books and all the thought leaders will say that they are. And, for the record, I'm going to say that they're very important too. However, what that tends to manifest itself in is people struggling to, I guess, bond or interact or interface with other organizations that maybe don't have as strong an understanding about what product is, like because they've not read all those books and they don't really understand like why these product people are talking the way that they are or saying the things that they're saying. In fact, I had a fireside chat with a team just before this, in fact, and one of the questions that they came up, I can't remember the specific question, but it was something around selling the value of product thinking or product teams or whatever. And my question to them was, well, how many times have you sat there and let other teams from around the business sell their value to you? Like, how many times you sit there saying, hey, CS team, come and impress me, or hey, sales team, come and impress me? Like, no other team seems to need to do that or feel that they need to do that or be in that position. And I don't know if this is because product management is still a relatively sort of misunderstood or not quite well-defined role compared to maybe some of the more established roles, or if it's just a factor of certain types of companies where maybe more sales-led companies where maybe it's a little bit more likely that there's going to be certain entrenched viewpoints or such. But I just find that a lot of the problems that come up are that kind of the uncertainty of where product fits with an organization and how they can persuade or influence people to work the way that they want to work or that they believe would be the best way to work, and trying to basically diffuse some of the inevitable arguments when you start to have those kind of ideological battles.
What's fascinating to me is a lot of the examples that you're describing are people problems. They're challenges in communication and understanding, and less the technical challenge. And so it's always interesting to run into, organizations that are struggling from the technical perspective, but that seems to be not as common. I have to just say from my own experience, I completely agree and understand that, most of these challenges are really the interconnection between people and the understanding and building that shared language of this is why we do things. This is how we need to, this is what the future looks like if we succeed together. And so it's really fascinating to me to hear how that's coming up in your own work, and it is an ongoing theme and people you're talking to all over the world.
Yeah, it is genuinely a people problem, and it's a people business. And again, I guess to your point around the technical side, I mean, obviously, there are always going to be technical issues. There are going to be people sitting there weighed down under tech debt or unable to make progress on product initiatives or unable to maybe even build the things that they want to build because they don't have the skills in-house, or maybe because in certain cases those things aren't even really possible to be built in some ways. And those technical discussions and problems we shouldn't kind of shy away from. Obviously, those need to be solved as well, but they're solved by obviously good technical people, but good technical people having good discussions and understanding why things are important. Your book, Alignment, it's all about alignment. Like, we need to be able to take all of our colleagues on a journey. And that's one of the biggest things I try and push is like, it's not about winning arguments with people or proving the value of anything. Like, I obviously, as a product person, believe in the value of quote unquote product thinking and the ability to get in front of the curve or get ahead of the curve and work out what your users want, what the most important problems are, best ways to solve them, beat your competitors in the market by coming up with a more compelling offering and selling it at a price that both sustains you and the customers will buy, all of that good stuff. Like, I believe in product thinking, but I don't believe in trying to sell product thinking by talking about product thinking, because I've never had a conversation with a non-product person where I sat there trying to quote bits of book at them and they said, oh yeah, okay, cool. Like, they've got their own books, they've got their own mindsets, they've got their own ideologies that they're used to. Like, sales teams have all their own frameworks, CS teams have all their own frameworks, developers have all their own frameworks, and it's very rare that we as product people sit there and say to them, oh, hey, tell me about your framework. Like, tell me about your sales methodology. Tell me how you qualify your leads and stuff like that. We don't ever ask those questions because we just trust that those people are doing the job the best way that they can. But we feel somehow that the only way to justify the validity or the benefits of product thinking is to somehow get dogmatic and, bookish about stuff, rather than, as I recommend, is just try and really explicitly sell the business benefits and the problems that you're solving, ideally with past examples as well. So, hey, development team, that stuff that happened last year that caused a massive problem in XYZ. Well, actually, if we tried this, this, and this, like, maybe that would have flagged the problem sooner. Maybe that would have helped us to avert some of the problems that we did have. And not calling it product thinking, but just, it kind of is, but you have to wrap it in a way that's consumable. And I think that so much of this is like, for example, that's messaging, right? That's positioning your internal teams and the types of ways that you want to work. And there are so many things that we, if you think about it, that we do for our products, like when we're positioning or when we're trying to go out and talk to our users and empathize with them and stuff like that. There are so many things that we do as part of our jobs that we somehow seem to not do when we're talking to our stakeholders and our colleagues at work, because we kind of other them and we just think that they're not clever as we are. They don't understand how product stuff works, and I think that's just a really destructive way to think. And we need to turn some of those inestimable skills where we can sit there and get into people's minds and understand and empathize with their problems and start to point that at our colleagues so we can understand their problems, why they are behaving or reacting like they are, and try and find common ground rather than, drawing into camps.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more with you, Jason. I think this is a beautiful segue into the next thing that you've been touching on that I want to kind of unpack here in more detail, which is, you've been in both the product management and in the product leadership role many times. And so I think for, depending on the size of the organization, whether you're a startup or maybe you're an established company, the idea of what product management versus product leadership looks like in an organization is very different. And so for, on my benefit, let alone anybody listening, I'd love to hear you kind of unpack what you see the differences between those two functions when you're in a management role of driving product and when you're in a leadership role, and what you see some of the core skills addressing these people problems that you've been talking about. And maybe there's some hard skills too that are really important that you want to highlight that really differentiate there. But I'd love to get your take on that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that often disappoints me, is when you see, it's almost like they bring an adult in to take over the product function at maybe the C-suite level, for example. Like, you get your industry CPO, subject matter expert, someone that's got really good business chops, but no product chops at all. But they obviously get put into that position because they want someone that's really businessy, really strategic, and really kind of business focused. Now, I understand why people want that. And I guess the most disappointing thing is that I don't know how much it's changing. It's certainly more widespread. This opinion, this opinion is out there now, is that we need to get product leaders better at business. They need to understand more than what it is to be just a good product practitioner, to craft really good roadmaps and write really good one pages or PRDs or whatever. Like, those things are obviously very important for individual contributors, but at the same time, you're never going to make it as that kind of senior level product leader interfacing with the rest of the business and realizing that actually product leadership at the top level is not about really being a product person at all. You probably should be one. Like, you should have been a product manager or be so super humble that you can get like top level VPs or something in like that to kind of support you while you do this kind of up in the cloud strategy stuff. But you're not a product manager anymore when you get to that point. Your job is to almost treat the company and the organization and the people within it as like this whole meta product, and try and help to work out how to optimize all of that. And optimizing could be obviously like how you lay out the teams, the types of people you hire, the culture that you have within the organization. Like, you need to work out ways to reduce as much friction, promote as much collaboration, cross-functional work, and all of that good stuff. Now, that's not just for the product leader. That should be a cross-functional within the organization, within the leadership team as well. But I do think it's important for product leaders not to get too hung up on the fact that their product, that they've got product in their name. These are business leaders. It's their job to take the business forward. And the different angle that they bring to the table is simply that they've got a different mindset. They've got a different set of hard skills that has helped to get them where they are. But those hard skills on their own aren't enough. Again, this is why I often recommend, and have tried to do myself, again, thinking about my background as a very sort of technical person and then moving into product management, but still having that as my background, making sure that I'm not just reading product books or technical books, but reading as many books and going on as many educational journeys as possible in things that aren't part of my job, so that I can understand how businesses work. So be that financial books or marketing books, sales books, customer success books, any books on operations, general entrepreneurial and startup books, and biographies about how other people did it. Like, these all areas that touch on product management, but that many product managers and product leaders don't necessarily have much of an idea about how these things work. Like, how many people have gone and read loads of sales books? You can't just win by reading books, obviously, but I want to be able to have good conversations with people from any function within the business, good strategic top level conversations with people anywhere within the business, and be able to contribute in those conversations and be interested in those conversations and understand how those conversations map back to what I'm responsible for. So the product function and the delivery of the product and the strategy. If I can't have those conversations, I could be missing something, and I'm probably not doing as good a job as I could be. So from a kind of a top level leadership, I think it's really important for people to be as rounded as possible. Now, I don't have an MBA, but I'm also quite old. I've been around the block a few times. I've worked for a lot of people. I've seen a lot of things, and I've kind of almost got the School of Hard Knocks MBA to some extent. And, I'm sure I'm slightly over-aggrandizing it, but that's the kind of way I see it. I'm not saying that everyone has to go out on a MBA odyssey or anything like that, but I do think that it's just really important for people as they move into that kind of senior product leadership and potentially CPO role, that they see themselves as business leaders, not product leaders. When it comes to the kind of the day-to-day product management, I mean, it's kind of that, but in a smaller sense, right? Because ultimately, product managers are themselves still leaders. They're not as much leaders as the people that are managing the product leaders in a sense. Like, their realm of leadership, their purview is somewhat lesser, but at the same time, they're not there delivering stuff like typing stuff in or designing stuff or doing architectural diagrams or all of the stuff that the engineers and the designers are going to be doing. They're there to effectively collaborate, coordinate, make the case for, get good data, try and do all of the stuff that is a smaller version of what the product leadership team are doing. And I still believe that those people should be spending a lot of their time, again, understanding not just how their development team works, but how all of this fits together as a system. And if they can do that, then they could be much more effective as PMs, but they can also be much more effective as they try and get into leadership themselves, because I don't want to see product managers, as they want to progress through their career, get into a point where they stall because they've kind of reached the limit of their natural talents. They need to kind of keep pushing that on and get enough of a rounded view so that they can actually have a chance of getting into that leadership position, rather than getting kind of having someone parachuted in over the top of them because their leadership team thinks that they haven't got it.